Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Facebook Live show of Golden Domer Daily. I am your host, Ben Belden. Usually you can find me on iTunes and SoundCloud and Stitcher and all those things hosting the Under the Dome podcast, but I decided to do something a little bit different tonight and do this Facebook Live stream because it's really the first time that I was doing it. It's been a rough week. Last week I was kept away from the microphone by an illness, and I just wasn't going to get on the mic and start coughing all over the place. And it's been a catch-up week for me. I'm a teacher, so I've got a lot of things to grade and things. It's been a catch-up week. It's been a rough week at school just because there's been so much to do. And, I wanted to get on the microphone and I wanted to do some of these things. So if we get any live viewers here, I'm not sure if I'm even able to tell because, like I say, this is the first time I'm doing this. So anyway, regardless, if you've got a comment, leave a comment, and maybe we'll address some of your things as we go on through the show. If not, this is going to be released in podcast form later, so that might end up being what it is. I don't know. But so before I get started, I just wanted to plug that Golden Domer Daily is going to be continuing a partnership that we just established with IndianaSportsCoverage.com. So pretty much everything stays the same. You can still find us on Twitter at NDDomerDaily. We've got an Instagram as well at the same handle, and all of that stays the same, except for the fact that the links that are going to be posted are coming from IndianaSportsCoverage.com. We've worked out a little bit of a merger, and we're excited about the things, I guess, that Indiana sports coverage can do for us, and we're excited about what we can do for them as we continue to grow this thing and do that as well. So, by the way, I barely introduced myself. I'm Ben Belden. I'm the founder of Golden Domer Daily, and you can find me on Twitter at bbelden330. Make sure that you go on there, you find that stuff, you go to our Twitter and that type of thing. You find all of our talented writers, and also make sure you're checking out the Indiana sports coverage guys as well. So again, that's IndianaSportsCoverage.com. Also, before I start, I wanted to thank a couple of our partners. First of all, Jason and Nate over at the Dose Leprechauns podcast are doing a great job. You'll see our logo on the banner behind their podcast as well, and you can check out their podcasts on our iTunes channel as well. And also Lynn and Ryan over at TNNDN, that's the new Notre Dame Nation, TNNDN.com. They've been gracious enough to allow us to use some of their really great photography on our website and in our articles as well. And that's been really fun. So thanks to all of those people. And with all that out of the way, let's talk a little bit of football. So I haven't discussed the Michigan State win that much. I know it happens, we're 5 days removed now, but that's okay. First of all, I think I'm really excited to say that this is a team that forces turnovers now. This has been a fun team to watch so far. This Michigan State game I watched while I was actually sitting at a wedding. But then I came back the next day and watched the recording of it. But it was actually kind of funny. I mean, there was a nice little contingency of Notre Dame fans at the wedding that I was attending, and we gathered around, we meaning there were about 3-4 of us at any given time, gathered around a small little telephone screen and watched Notre Dame, for the most part, put a whooping on Michigan State. And it was nice because let's just say that I was at a wedding when they played last year at Texas, and it was kind of the same type of a deal, and let's just say that the outcome wasn't good, and I was hoping that I wasn't going to be experiencing deja vu, and I didn't. It was nice to see Notre Dame come out, hit him in the mouth right away with the offense taking it down and scoring eventually on a QB draw from Brandon Wimbush, and then obviously you had Julian Love with the interception, the pick six, that got us off to a good start. That's the type of team that I think Notre Dame has to be if they want to continue to be really good, and I think that they can be really good. So regardless of all that stuff, regardless of the fact that I was watching on, a 4x6 screen and all of that, it came shouting off the screen at me that this team is just a different Notre Dame team. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But like I say, this is a team that forces turnovers now. Notre Dame has they have forced 9 turnovers on the season through 4 games. So they're averaging nearly over 2 takeaways per game at this point. Last year, they forced a grand total of 14 turnovers in 12 games, which is barely over 1, obviously, if you're any good at math. So that says a couple of things to me. Number one, it says that, and I think this is probably the most important one, that it says that Mike Elko has these guys playing a type of defense that is allowing them to go and just make plays. They just go and they make plays. And it's great to see, because last year, instead of making plays, we were pulling our hairs out because we were letting receivers run through our secondary for wide open big plays. They were gashing us on run plays. It was not great. Mike Elko's got us lined up. We don't see the type of, I don't know. Last year, I phrased it that there was a lot of, I guess, panic in the defensive players before the ball was snapped, because they're all looking to the sideline. They're trying to get the play call in. They're trying to get aligned right. And who knows how many times they're just caught completely off guard. But that type of thing isn't happening. They're flying around to the ball. Every time there's a run play, whether it was against Michigan State, whether it was against Boston College, whoever it was against, there are 7, 8 Notre Dame helmets at the football by the time the play is whistled dead. And it just jumps off the screen at you, just the way that these guys are playing with a little bit more reckless abandon and a little bit more, I don't know, want to, but there's less paralysis by analysis, I guess you could kind of say. So it's a really positive thing that's going on in Notre Dame, for Notre Dame, on defense at this point. Also, I wanted to address a couple things that I've heard throughout the week. Obviously, there are some national people and there's some Notre Dame haters out there that are trying to say things that, Michigan State is a struggling team. Yes, that's absolutely true. And they are not the Michigan State of old. They're not the Michigan State that 2 years ago was playing in the college football playoff with Connor Cook and all of that. However, this was a Power 5 Big Ten opponent on the road at night in prime time. Lots of things. The environment was going against Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame came in with much more momentum. Michigan State had a bye week to prepare for this as well. A lot of things were going against Notre Dame. This could have been a one of those games where fans and coaches and players and all that make the excuse that, well, we weren't as ready to play this as Michigan State was, or we were overwhelmed by the moment. This team doesn't seem overwhelmed by the moment. It seems like they're pretty good. They know they're pretty good, and they're walking the walk, and they're not doing a whole lot of talking about it either. And it seems like there's this business-like, humble approach from this Notre Dame football team, and that's what I like to see. Obviously, we squandered our first opportunity of the year to get a big marquee win when we lost against Georgia. But, things happen, I guess. And what happened was we were maybe there were some growing pains. I mean, let's face it, this Notre Dame team is a young team in the fact that, you're playing a really young quarterback and with a new offensive coordinator. I'm going to talk about all of that here in a second as well. But they're, asking this team to go out and play against an SEC team who knows who they are and expects them to win in prime time. I mean, it was a tall task. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been done, but it was a tall task. And I think that was a growing experience for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has shown that they've grown from it because, they took care of business against Michigan State. And now they're moving on. So the last thing that I'll say about this is that, we haven't seen a Notre Dame team string together like a 4-game stretch like this in quite some time. I mean, obviously you can look back to 2015, but even in 2015, there were some shaky wins against teams that were not that great. I think about Virginia, Deshaun Kaiser's first game. I mean, even before Malik Zaire went out middle of the third quarter, that was a really shaky game. The point is that Notre Dame is clearly wearing down on teams, clearly wearing them down with the run, and clearly just winning at the line of scrimmage, doing the things that they're supposed to do, doing the things that, if you want to take the step to being a really good elite team, you have to do these types of things first. Is Notre Dame a really good and elite type of team right now? Not really sure that I'd say that they are, but they're getting there. And it's just so apparent that they're getting there that I just can't say it enough. But anyway, so a couple other quick thoughts and pointers, I guess, from this win over Michigan State is that Notre Dame has a really good strategy. And I think that this Michigan State win was probably like the best called game of Chip Long's short tenure at Notre Dame. I think that kind of goes without saying. Long was able to get Wimbush some really easy throws. They were throwing the ball to the sidelines a little bit, short into the sidelines, and they were throwing the ball deep as well. And there weren't a whole lot of those in-between routes, those in-between passes, the ones that can get Wimbush in trouble and that he struggled with a little bit so far this year. It's either let it loose or throw it short or use your legs and get down and run. So the game plan was good. There weren't quite as many designed runs. Wimbush didn't carry the ball 21 times, so that was great. But I think what you saw a lot of was that Wimbush is really starting to settle into this offense. And not only is Wimbush settling into the offense, but Chip Long is settling into the offense as well as he gets to know his personnel and what's going to work in game and what isn't. And I think that is something that's missed a little bit in this whole situation and this whole, Notre Dame has struggled in the passing game. That's not a big secret. But what you have to consider about that to a certain extent is not only is Brandon Wimbush like a brand new quarterback, but Chip Long is brand new to Notre Dame. Chip Long might not have even known who Brandon Wimbush was last year at this time. So they've needed to develop a little bit of a cohesive type relationship. Take into account also that Tommy Rees was brought in as the quarterback's coach. That has something to do with it. Tommy Rees and Chip Long have never worked together. Brian Kelly didn't know Chip Long really before he hired him. There was a lot of things, and there still is a lot of things that need ironed out for this team to reach their full potential. They haven't reached their full potential yet. They're getting there. And like this Michigan State's game was a step in the right direction. Keep in mind also that in like past years, it was Brian Kelly who was managing the quarterbacks as well. And, when Everett Golson came in, Brian Kelly had a pretty good idea of who Everett Golson was and how to use him. When Malik Zaire came in, had a good idea of who Malik Zaire was, even though, Malik's tenure at Notre Dame was pretty short-lived. Even Deshaun Kaiser, when Malik went down, Brian Kelly had a good idea of who Deshaun Kaiser was, the things that he could do, what he was going to be able to do well, even though he was the second-string quarterback at the time. And the point, I guess, is that Brian Kelly had this relationship with these guys for years before he had to use them in the game. Long and Wimbush don't have that type of relationship, or they didn't have that type of relationship. It's still developing, and it's still a thing that's going to be a work in progress. Again, like I say, Michigan State is the next step in the right direction, and then, going out and taking care of business against the pesky Miami of Ohio type team is going to be, another step in the right direction as well. Hopefully what we see in this Miami of Ohio game that we haven't seen from Notre Dame teams in years past is that we don't mess around for too long trying to, get a lead. And then once we can get a lead, then we can work on some things. And I think that that's going to be very beneficial to Notre Dame going forward. So one other thing I wrote about that is, kind of a product of this Michigan State win and just what I've witnessed on the field so far this year is it seems to me like there is a distinct culture change that has gone on at Notre Dame that was necessary for Notre Dame to start winning football games consistently and doing it the right way. And the first guy that I want to talk about is Matt Balis, who's the new strength and conditioning coach at Notre Dame. And a lot has been made of, as soon as Matt Balis was brought on in January to Notre Dame, he started this new strength and conditioning program, and guys were posting their before and after pictures after 2-3 weeks of working out, and they go from looking like this scrawny little guy to the Incredible Hulk. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but honestly, not that much. But regardless, so Matt Balis has come in here. He's done a great job so far, obviously, and you're really starting to see it on the football field. And I have to throw an assist to my co-writer, Nate Urbach, who put up an article today on IndianaSportsCoverage.com about how Notre Dame is now conditioned to win. It was a nice little play on words by Nate, and it's really appropriate. You see guys out there, and I focus on the defense when I talk about this a whole lot, but you see guys out there like Romeo Okwara, who sticks out to me as a guy who just absolutely blew up a reverse play in the third quarter of the Michigan State game by just absolutely bull rushing the tackle that was supposed to be guarding or supposed to be blocking him. And he didn't let this guy on this jet sweep reverse get outside the tackle box. Guy had to cut it back. Aquara doesn't get credit for the tackle. I think like Andrew Trembetti came in then and cleaned it up, but it was a situation. It was something to behold. Multiple times we've seen Drew Tranquil just have blockers and just throw the blocker out of the way and cause a lot of havoc in doing so. And I actually have some clips of these types of things saved, but like there has been plenty of times where a Notre Dame guy has just absolutely dispatched their blocker or just thrown a guy or bull rushed a guy into, gotten a whole lot of penetration by a bull rush. And it's just something that we didn't see before, and you're starting to see it on the field. And you also see it in the offensive line a little bit. Like these guys, like this is a good offensive line. I'd argue that, they could have played better. Certainly they could have played better against Georgia. As a unit together, I'm not sure that they're the most cohesive unit ever. And that was kind of the knock on them last year. But individually, there are some really good offensive linemen on this team. Everyone makes a big deal about Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson, and they're as good as it gets. Although McGlinchey has had his struggles at certain times this year. But when you watch Notre Dame's run plays and you see how they develop and you see Quentin Nelson just easily getting, pulling right down the line and going up and sealing a linebacker, or, same with Alex Barzer. There's even a couple plays where Sam Mustipher, the center, has to worry about getting that snap back, and he's out there pulling in front of a play as well. These offensive linemen are making plays, and it's almost weird to say that an offensive lineman is making plays, but these offensive linemen are making plays, and they are blocking in space really well, and they're really a lot to they deserve a whole ton of credit for how well Josh Adams has been able to run the football so far this year. Lastly, and this was another thing in Nate's article that I talked about here a little bit ago. There's been, and I have to knock on wood when I say this, but Notre Dame hasn't experienced the type of injuries that they have this year. And, I think that just, last year, on top of all of the struggles for Notre Dame, anytime it seemed like you had something going, somebody that was an integral piece of this team was getting nicked up. And that just hasn't happened this year through 4 games. Now, obviously, it's a long season. We've got 8 more regular season games to talk about some of these things. But I just think that it speaks a whole awful lot to the strength and conditioning program at Notre Dame that it's taken a step in the right direction. And these guys are, they're healthy, they're feeling good, they're exploding off the ball, and they're just playing some really good football right now. And I just had to take a couple seconds to talk about that aspect of the culture change. Make sure that you go over to IndianaSportsCoverage.com and read Nate's full article. It's a really good article, and it brings up some good points. But the other thing about this culture change that I want to talk about is it just seems like there's a different type of accountability on this football team. And we've heard Brian Kelly throughout this year talk about the fact that, there's his new favorite catchphrase seems to be attention to detail, attention to detail. Why isn't so-and-so playing? Well, not enough attention to detail. And it's something that we've heard him say over and over again. We don't, you never know exactly what it means, and nor should you necessarily ever know exactly what it means. But this attention to detail clearly actually means something. It's not just Brian Kelly up there spouting. I mean, ask Kevin Stefferson what attention to detail means. We don't know what Kevin Stefferson did to basically get himself suspended for 4 games, but obviously it was something bad enough that, Brian Kelly said, well, if I can't trust you in this area, I can't trust you on the football field. Same goes with Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool was a guy that was, playing pretty well through a lot of spring practice, making some big plays in the spring game, that type of a thing. hasn't played a whole lot, or at least didn't play a whole lot in the first 3 games. We saw him a little bit more against Michigan State. He's had to earn his way into that wide receiver rotation. Alizé Mack, has had to earn his way back, and he's probably not back all the way yet. But these guys are having to earn their spots. There are guys out there, and and I'm going to throw it back to the defense here for another minute and say that Notre Dame is playing like 20 some guys on defense, and it's just been great to see that all of these guys are rotating on through, and it's just there's some serious competition going on in this Notre Dame team, and that's one thing that Brian Kelly talks about all the time is the ability to compete. These guys are out there, they're competing in practice, they're competing in under the lights on Saturday nights and Saturday afternoons as well, and it's just having a great effect on the program. Think about it. If you work a job, when there are clear expectations for you, and those expectations are clearly communicated to you, it's easier for you to do your job well and to get results if you know what's expected of you. And that seems to be, it's simple to say, but that seems to be what one of the major differences between last year's Notre Dame and this year's Notre Dame. I'm getting a question from Drake Huffman. Hey, buddy, what is your college football playoff ranking for Notre Dame at the end of the season? Wow, that's a great question. And I'll address it right now. I think that Notre Dame is going to – I don't think they're necessarily going to be around the top 4 as much as I'd like them to be. Now, certainly I can maybe reevaluate when they play USC here in – I guess that would be about 3 weeks. If they beat USC, I think they have a really good opportunity to finish in the top 10 to 12 because, if they beat USC, I'd probably expect them to lose one more time throughout the rest of the year. If they lose to USC, then they, maybe they're in the top 10 to 12, but probably they're, in the top 25, I think. And I think that's right where Notre Dame should be for their, for where they are as a football program right now. So that's where I see them ending up. Real quickly, before I sign off, I want to talk about Notre Dame's next opponent, Miami of Ohio, because I feel that not a lot of people know about the old Red Hawks of Miami. So Miami's coming into this game sitting at 2-2, and Miami is, I don't want to say that they've underachieved. They weren't supposed to lose opening week against Marshall, although they had to go down to Marshall to do it. They beat Austin Peay. They lost to a bigger team in Cincinnati. And then last week they took care of business against Central Michigan. Whenever we did our opponent preview series to start the season, I talked to a writer for Miami of Ohio and talked about the expectations for Miami of Ohio this season. This is a team that is starting to this was a team that's supposed to, I guess, contend for the division, and that's the MAC East. And they're supposed to be one of the best teams in the MAC. And take that for what it's worth. They're supposed to be a pretty decent football team, and I'd say that just based off of looking at some of their numbers, they've probably underachieved a little bit. But there are a couple guys that you're going to want to keep an eye on for Miami of Ohio. One of them is their quarterback Ragland, who took over, I believe it was the middle of last season, and really just kind of lit the world on fire as far as the expectations for a guy who was playing because of an injury. But this year he has come in, he's completed 61 of 116 passes. That's only 52.6%. Not throwing the ball real efficiently, 881 yards over the span of 4 games. He's not spreading the ball all over the field like, I think Miami fans kind of expected him to be doing at this point in his career. He is averaging 7.6 yards per attempt, which is pretty decent. He's thrown for 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So he's not turning the ball over a whole awful lot. But, this Miami Ohio team was supposed to be a team that was throwing the ball all over the place, gashing with the run, throwing the ball outside, running up the middle, that type of thing. They're having a little bit of success in the run game, but I'd argue not a lot. And they're just not hitting on all cylinders offensively the way I think that, if you asked a Miami fan, the way I think that they would like to. So the 2 guys really that you're going to want to keep an eye on for Miami of Ohio are Kenny Young and Alonzo Smith. They're both running backs. Kenny Young is a smaller type scat back, I guess you could say. He's listed at 5'7", 179. He's a speedster. He's going to try to, I kind of think he's our smaller equivalent in running style of Dexter Williams type of a deal based off of what I've seen from him. He's number 3. He's leading the team with 52 carries, 220 yards. Behind him then is Alonzo Smith. He's listed at 5'10", 208, so he's a little bit more stocky of a guy, and he's kind of more of the, I guess you could say, the kind of the power back. He's number 26, and he's ran the ball 50 times for 240 yards. So those guys are really splitting the carries, almost 50-50 at this point. And then in the passing game, they've got a couple of guys that are worth watching. Their main target, their main receiver, number 1 is, he wears number 1. James Gardner is his name. He's a big guy. He's an Equanimeous St. Brown type body. He's 6'4". He's 216 pounds. And I have him for catching 16 receptions, 294 yards, 2 scores on the year. And then the other guy is their tight end, number 82, Ryan Smith. And he's a big guy as well, 6'4", 265. He's more of a traditional tight end. He's more of like the Durham Smythe spectrum of tight ends rather than being like more towards the Alizé Mack, who I'd argue is almost, well, before this year I would have said he was more of a receiver, but he's not the athletic freak that Alizé Mack is. But he's caught 10 balls for 144 yards. Those are really their top 2 receivers. They've got a lot of guys that have caught passes this year. But really they've focused a lot on the run game. As a team, they've carried the ball 165 times for 516 yards. That's only an average of 3.1 yards per carry. So they're not lighting the world on fire. They've hit on some big ones. They've hit on, if you look down their stats, like long of 31, long of 18, long of, some double digit numbers here. So this should be a game where Notre Dame, regardless, comes in and takes care of business. I mean, that's just really all there is to it. And, I guess at the beginning of the season, whenever I was hearing about Miami of Ohio's red hot offense, I was, I guess, a little bit apprehensive, like, oh, this could be a hardcore trap game for Notre Dame. Miami of Ohio, based off of what I've watched, doesn't have the type of athletes, I guess you could say, to even play on the same football field as Notre Dame. And they're not even executing their scheme. Because really, I mean, when you don't have the athletes, you have to have a better scheme. And they're not even really executing their scheme good enough to, I guess, I don't know, good enough to be around in this football game for any period of time. Let's see what Drake has to say here. Ohio University versus Miami of Ohio. Who wins? Ohio University is projected to win according to ESPN. Man, I can't tell you that I know anything about Ohio University football. Since I know that you're down at OU right now, I'll say OU, oh yeah, on that one. But that's the only time that's about the 4th time I've said that today. But anyway, so that's really about all I got as far as my little preview here of Miami of Ohio. I've got a few people who have jumped on, so thanks to you guys. Thanks to my loyal supporters who have jumped on. I appreciate those of you that have tuned in for any period of time here. This might be something that I do. Obviously, the first time, it's not going to be a knock it out of the park type of thing, but this might be something that I do on a semi-regular occasion, maybe do it like the same night every week. I don't know. Like I say, it was a long week for me. Just wanted to get on and talk some Notre Dame football to anybody who would listen. And so you'll be able to, if you missed any of this and you want to listen to it in podcast form, make sure that you go out and you check out the Under the Dome podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever. You can download us wherever. But make sure you go on iTunes, write us a review. That would be huge for us. And then make sure you're checking out IndianaSportsCoverage.com. That's where you can find some of my writing as well. Check me out on Twitter, BBeldon330. And also check out Golden Domer Daily on Twitter, at NDDomerDaily. We're also on Instagram and all of that good stuff as well. I think that's really about all I got at this point. I have talked now for 29 minutes to myself pretty much, which is kind of new. I've never really done a podcast that has lasted 29 minutes solo before, so I don't know if I'm proud of myself or a little bit ashamed. But until next time, thanks for listening, and go Irish.